We'll do a review in Likutei Sichos and Chelik Chavtes. This is the parshas for Hazinu. It's a Rashi Sicha, and the Rebbe discusses a lengthy Rashi, um, and the Rebbe explains basically that at this point, Yeshua was acting in a way as a Nasi together with Moshe Rabbeinu, and notwithstanding that he was a Nasi and he was given a Meturgaman, a translator, and yet uh, Yoshua remained as humble as always. The Rebbe will explain a lot of details in the Rashi, in the Pshuta Shel Mikra. And first, the Rebbe points out that you see from this Rashi that it's not just that Rashi quotes things from Medrashim, but they all, we have to learn and realize that it's specifically connected in Pshuta Shel Mikra. That's why in our case, for example, Rashi brings three ideas in the same Rashi, and they really come from different places and different Mefarshim. Why would Rashi bring it all? If Rashi just quotes, then okay, why would he bring from different places? So we have to say that Rashi, everything is precise, which proves the Rebbe's point, how much Rashi is particular, and every word and every aspect of Rashi is calculated. We're learning the Sikha in memory of our son, Rav Levi Yitzchok ben Chaim Tzvi. Tehei Nishmasi through Rebbe Tzur Chaim. We'll go step by step. Hazinu. Aleph. Shengeret Filmo. So we already spoken many times. First, the Rebbe wants to use this Rashi as a proof that Rashi is not just quoting Midrashim, but it has to uh, sort of fit and answer things that are difficult in Pshat. Because the Rebbe said, "Shegeret fil mol, as in Yonesh shel Pirush Rashi bePirush Torah." Now, what is Rashi trying to do in his commentary on the Torah? Is Rashi alein gita reisdom klal? It says Rashi himself has given out his said the rule. Ani lebasi elipshute shel mikra. I'm just here to give the simple meaning of the text. The pshute shel mikra. And unafila in the erter vu bahashkofer rishoyne zetois, and even in those places, which at first glance it appears as Rashi brings tabarok padrash shel Chazal, that Rashi just brings down just like that without pshat or just bringing down a expounding of Chazal. Uh, so if you look closely, you'll see a Merkadaikis Zetman. But when you look into, you see as der gebrachter drash, that when he brings down a drash, if he doesn't introduce it by saying Rabbi Nesenu Dorshu, if he doesn't say first, well, our expounded by rabbis or similar is mukhrach b'pshuta shel mikra. So then this is something which is forced out. This is needs to be brought in to explain the literal meaning of the pasuk. So this is the Rebbe's general rule about Rashi. The Rebbe expounds. This is the Rebbe's general theme, and that's the Rebbe's basis for explaining all the Rashi, that it has to make sense in the literal level of understanding. The Rebbe says from our Rashi, this is very obvious. We can see this is very uh, proven, this point in our Rashi, because Rashi just brings down three different medrashim, so it's not just bringing down medrashim, and seems to be no connection between them until we explained it according to Pshat. And this is nikir by from Boilet in Pirush Rashi beParshasenu. This is in a very protruding way, in a very obvious way. We can tell this in the Rashi in our Parsha. Rashi Zokta Pirush, Rashi says a commentary, was when ma'ayin in the Mekoides from Pirush, then when you look into the source of Rashi's commentary, Zetman ados seinen drei besondere droshes Chazal. You see that these are three separate expounding of our sages of blessed memory. Totally different expounding. Rashi brings them together. Eine in Gemara. One comes from the Gemara. One, three parts in the Rashi. That three separate different expounding. One comes from the Gemara. The zweite in Sifri beParshas Vayelech. The second one comes in the Sifri in the portion of Vayelech and the previous parsha. Ulebsoif Adrash besteht in Sifri Al-Asar, and then also Adrash. In the end, the third point is a drasha that's written in the Sifri over here in the Parshas Hazinua. Und b'mikoyram, but in the source from these drashas, haben die drashas kein Sichos nicht zwischen sich. These different expounding ideas have no connection. They're three separate pieces, not connected. Aber Rashi b'pirush ala Torah is alle drei metzare, but Rashi bringing down these different quotes from the different places combines them all. Und koilelin ein pirush, she makes one commentary of it. So Rashi would just want to bring down drushes of Chazal. Why does he bring down one here, one from there, and one further? Rashi actually connects them with a Vav Hamoisiv that the Rebbe brings down. So it must mean that there's a reason in Pshat why we're bringing down the various different medrashim which don't seem to have a connection. So we have to therefore say, we're forced to say, as they that the reason we bring them down because it's important. In order to understand the meaning of the verse, the simple meaning of the verse, was thus bin zusammen, that which ties them, that because we're trying to understand the pshat, only through bringing down the three different sources, medrashim, is to be able to understand the meaning of the pasuk. B'meila is oich der seder hava osam b'pirushei, and therefore also the order, the way he brings them in his commentary, inyan was is in Pshutish Mikra. This is something which is the simple meaning of the pasuk, which means they're not just separate. They're not just bringing down three different medrashim, but the order is also important. One leads to the other, leads to the other. With the Rebbe, can be the basis for the Rebbe's explanation how these three separate matters in this Rashi. Is common, as will be read later on. So what are we talking about? So now the Rebbe brings down the Rashi. It brings down the three aspects that Rashi talks about. So over here on the Pasuk, and this is in Perek Lamed Beis Pasuk Memdalad in Hazinu, it says after Hazinu, the whole Deshira was related, the Pasuk says, Vayove Moshe Vayidaber. Moshe came and he spoke to the Yidden, and then it says, Hu v'Hoshea ben Nun, Moshe and Hoshea ben Nun. So, is Rashi Maitik? So Rashi quotes from the Posik, from Posik the Werter Hu v'Hoshea ben Nun. On his Mefarish, it says that they both spoke, both Moshe and Yeshua and Hoshea ben Nun. And Rashi says, Shabbos shel Diyoi, Zugi Hoyso. It was a Shabbos of two, of pairs. A Shabbos of pairs, both Moshe and Yeshua. That Shabbos, both Moshe and Yeshua were basically in charge. Nitla Rishus Mezeh, Benitla Lazeh. So, permission was taken from Moshe Rabbeinu, and the permission was given over to Yehoshua. That's why it was a Shabbos of two, a pair, a Shabbos of a pair, because they split the Shabbos between Moshe and Yeshua, as we will see later on. And then Rashi brings seemingly another drasha, not connected directly to this, but Rashi brings down Hamed loy Moshe meturgamon li Yehoshua. Moshe placed a translator to Yehoshua. A meturgaman was somebody who would translate and articulate for the people what the rabbi, what the leader was teaching. So Moshe gave Yehoshua such a meturgaman so that Yehoshua will be a leader that has a meturgaman. Sheyehei doirish b'chayav, that during the lifetime of Moshe Rabbeinu, that Yeshua should be expounding and teaching in his lifetime, and he gave him the meturgaman. Why did Moshe Rabbeinu do this? Is Kidei shelo yemru Yisrael, so that the Yidden shouldn't say, "V'chaye rabach loy hoyelach lahorim rosh." During your teacher's lifetime, you should not have raised your head. Meaning, Rashi says that they were both leading Shabbos shel Diyezugi, or but Moshe Rabbeinu is the one that gave Yeshua a meturgamon, a translator, so that he is approving and that he is uh, con, uh, that he agrees, that he's consenting to the fact that Yeshua is darshaning, because he is the one that gave him the meturgamon. Because otherwise, the people might say, uh, "Why were you, when your teacher is still alive? Why are you darshaning?" So, but this is the second thing that Moshe Rabbeinu gave him the meturgamon. And then Rashi addresses another thing, a third point. V'lomo koiroi kan Hosheya. So why does he call him here Hosheya? It says in the pasuk Huva Hosheya bin Nun. We learned already in the beginning of the parsha by the Meraglim that he called the Hosheya bin Nun Yehoshua. All the time in the pasuk we refer to him as Yehoshua. Why all of a sudden we're calling him Hosheya? So Rashi brings down this drasha that Loimar Shalei Zocha Daita Olav, that his mind didn't get haughty over him. Even though greatness was been given to him now, that he became the leader, he still humbled himself just like in the beginning, like before. Okay, so this is seemingly three different sources and three different Rashis. So the Rebbe brings like this. The beginning, Hascholas Pirush Rashi, the beginning of Rashi's Pirush, that Shabbos shel Diyoy Sigi, Shabbos of two, of peers, Hoysa, Nitla Rishus Mizev and Nitla Lezeh, that it was taken from Moshe and given to Yeshua, stating Gemara Soita. That's recorded, brought down in the Gemara Soita. So that's this one drush, the Hemshech Pirush Rashi, and then when Rashi says continuations that Hamid la Moshe meturgaman lo Yeshua chulu, that he set up Moshe for Yeshua, a translator, state in Sifri Parshas Vayelach. That's in the Sifri, in the previous portion, in the portion of Vayelach, the portion before Hazinua. Und der Teuchen von Sie in Pirush Rashi, in the content of the end of Rashi, V'loma koire kaneshea, state in Sifri Parshas ala Posik, is in the Sifri, in our parsha, on this pasuk, Hu v'Hosheya bin Nun. Rashi is taking a piece of the Gemara Soita, is taking a piece of the Sifri in Vayelach together with the Sifri, which is in our pasuk, and combine them all together. Pravosis do Rashi mitzarev did Raibas under my morim in ein pirush. Why does Rashi combine these three separate statements in one commentary? Seem like the three separate yonim. The first two aspects still have a connection, at least between them, because the first thing, what we're saying is that it was a Shabbos of both. Over there, it's connected to the fact that Moshe Rabbeinu gave Yehoshua Meturgaman, so to consolidate that he was also in charge, and that Shabbos was with Moshe Rabbeinu's consent. So there's a connection there still. But this last piece that why is it called Hosea? There's something different. How's the connect? Unochmer, we can understand the first true aspects of Rashi. Aleph, that Shabbos shall the Yuzugi that it was a Shabbos of two, of pairs. And Beis, Hemed LeMoshe Meturkman LeYeshua Chulu, that Moshe Rabbeinu gave Yeshua a translator, Hob Mashayches visions of Betoichnom, they have a content connection. Why? Because Oich in Zweiten Inyan is Mudgash, because also in this second idea that he gave the Meturkman with their Inyan Harishus, is a Ribet Zoyeshe. The first point says it was taken from Moshe given to Yeshua. The second idea explains how that permission went over to Yeshua. It wasn't done in a way that Moshe Rabbeinu had a problem with it, but Fakert, Moshe Rabbeinu gave them a Turgamon. So that's connection, how it happened. So there is a connection between these two things. It's still different places that the source for this, but we still must understand that it's related. But this last, the continuation of the commentary. Why is he calling Mesheya? Is the in ganzen a besondere Bevornish. This is entirely a different answer that we're explanation. Was hat kein Scheiches nicht zu dem friedigen Ingen. It doesn't seem to have a connection to the previous idea. And yet there is a continuation. Not only does Rashi bring it down following the previous in, but he connects it with a vav. Is loy daivos Rashi steltes rein not sufficient. Not only does Rashi put it in themselves in the same saying, the same Rashi, nor verbindet noch mit der Vova Mechaber Moisi, but he actually ties it together with the previous, with a Vav, that is Mechaber Moisi, that connects to the previous. And the Rebbe, like Rashi writes, V'lomo koire kanchu. And why does he call him here Hosea? Ki ilu v'deshayla stelt sich davke, as if to say that this question is only raised only after and as a follow-up to the Friedikun Pirush, Shabbos shall the Zugichulu. Since we said that it was a Shabbos of pairs, and Hamed Lei Moshe Meturgamon, he placed him on Meturgamon. So the question is, so why does he call him here Hosea? What's the connection? And the Rebbe says now we find in different Rashis these inyonim mentioned separately, which means you can mention the idea that there was a Shabbos of both of them, and Rashi doesn't have to say, in the other Rashi, he doesn't say that Moshe Rabbeinu placed him on Meturgamon. And also the Meturgamon says elsewhere, in the Rashi and Pinchas, Rashi doesn't say there the continuation, though we don't find the Rashi, these are independent pieces that we can bring down. Here Rashi combines them. The Rebbe wants to explain that these pieces come after the other when we'll understand the explanation. So the Rebbe says, the Tmiyah now, this surprise that we are discussing here, Rashi combining three separate midrashim together, was Rashi's mitzarev drei besondere inyonim zusammen, that Rashi collects three separate ideas together, is noch größer, is even greater. Nicht nur kommen sie in besondere Erter, not only do they come in separate places in afilo besondere Svarim, Medrash Chazal, it's not in just separate places, there are different Svarim, different Medrash Chazal. One is from the Gemara, one is from Sifri. So and one is in Sifri over here in Vayelech, one is in Hazinu. Besides that, but no Rashi allein bring the erste zwei Maimorim b'mokom achar. Rashi himself brings already these two statements, the first two statements elsewhere. Aber jeder farzich, but Rashi brings each one by itself. So in the Chumash Bamidbar, when Moshe Rabbeinu was asking for a leader to follow him, so over there, the Eibishter tells him in Pinchas from Posik, on the verse, the Eibishter tells him that he should choose Yehoshua. So the Pasuk of Samachtas Yotcholov, you should lean your hands on him. Zokt Rashi says that ten loy meturgamon sheyidresh b'chayecha. Rashi says give him a translator so that he will darshan, he will expand, he will teach during your lifetime. Shelo yemru olav, so that they shouldn't say about Yeshua, that he should not have raised his head during while Moshe was alive. So the Eibishter is telling him, Samachtas Yotcha Olav, you lean your hand, you give him the Maturgamon, so that the people won't say that he shouldn't have started his teaching while Moshe Rabbeinu was alive. So here we have this first idea that the Eibishter said Moshe that Moshe should play some Maturgamon for Yeshua. And in Onei Parshas Vayelech, in the beginning of Parshas Vayelech, so this is in Parshas Pinchas, and in the beginning of Parshas Vayelech, the previous Parsha from Posik, Loi Uchal Oid Lotzis Velovei. So Rashi teaches, I can no longer go out and come in. Zokt Rashi, Eini Rashoi. Now, what means I'm not able to means I'm not allowed to. It's not that he was weak. It's not like he was weak. He didn't have the physical strength. But Rashi teaches because permission was taken from me and was given to Yeshua. So Rashi brings down in one Rashi about the idea of Samachta Yotcha, about the idea that it plays a Meturgamon. And in another Rashi, in the beginning of Vayelech, Rashi says that Moshe Rabbeinu was taken away from Moshe Rabbeinu, given to Yeshua. Das heißt, also Rashi sein die zwei Yonim, nicht lo Rishuschulu, that the permission was taken from him, which is in Parshas Vayelech in the beginning, on Hamid le Moshe Meturgaman, and that Moshe Rabbeinu placed this Meturgaman, or in Vayelech, the first is in Pasuk Lamed Aleph, Perek Lamed Aleph, Pasuk Chof. So they're two separate in Yonah. Rashi brings down by separately. Nit tolu ein in the andere. They're not dependent, hinged one on the other. Was ist machriach Rashi zu verbinden sie zusammen in unser Pasuk? What forces Rashi to tie these two commentaries in our Pasuk? Basically, the Rebbe wants to know what's the flow of this Rashi. First, to say that Nitla Rishus. And then he has to say that it made him a Maturgamon. And then the third thing is why he calls him Hoshea. The Rebbe wants to explain that one thing leads to the other thing, but the Rebbe shows that we can bring him separately. Rashi brings in Parshat Pinchas one idea in Parshat Vayelech, another idea, it doesn't connect them. Here Rashi brings down the three ideas. The idea of Parshas Vayelech, the idea of Parshas Pinchas, and then a new idea of Sifri on the place which says that why is he called Hoshea instead of Yeshua. The Rebbe further says, what exactly is the meaning that it was a Shabbos of two? And the Gemara, Rashi explains that it wasn't that they were both together, but they shared the Shabbos, not as the Rebbe will bring down. And Rashi doesn't say anything about it. So the Rebbe brings down like this. Gimel. We also need to understand the Maimer Shabbos shall the Yozagi Hoiso, that Nitla Rishus Mezev Nitla Zev. What does it mean? There was a Shabbos of two, and was taken from Moshe and given to Yeshua. Steht in Gemara Benegei an anderen Friedigen Posik. In the Gemara, it talks about a previous Posik, not the Posik Huva Yeshua. In Parshas Vayelech, steht Vayelech Moshe v'Yeshua v'Yisyatzu Bo'el Moed. In Posik over there, Yeshua goes along with Moshe, and they're standing in the Oil Moed. Why did Moshe Rabbeinu go with Yeshua? The whole time Moshe went by himself, and now Moshe is going with Yeshua. So the Gemara explains why they went together, because Shabbos shel Yezugi Hoiso, and that's why they were going together, Moshe and Yeshua, because they were both. And they both came to the Elmai. V'lechayra, hat Rashi gedarf zogen, no. V'lechayra hat Rashi gedarf zogen. So first the question is, am ganzen Pirush of them Posik in Parshas Vayelech. So Rashi should have said over there, it says that they went together. So this whole thing that Yeshua became a player is already in the portion of Vayelech, and not in Hazinua. In portion of Vayelech before, it says Moshe went to Yeshua. So L'chayra, hat Rashi gedarf sagen, dem ganzen Pirush, dem Posik in Parshas Vayelech. So Rashi should have said the entire interpretation on this verse in Parshas Vayelech. Why is Yeshua going to tell us that Yeshua was Nitla Rishus Mizev and Nitla Lozeh, as in the Gemara? Because the Gemara says that over there, that Shabbos shel Yezuga Hoiso. And then Rashi should follow that. He gave him a Turkaman, and Rashi said the Pirish over there. But over there it says Yeshua. That last piece couldn't say there, but it's just the first two pieces. Vayelech Moshe v'Yeshua. It says Yeshua there, but so Rashi should have said on that pasuk that it was a Shabbos like the Gemara. Over there it says the language Moshe and Yeshua the very first time, not like here it's the second time Huva Hosheya. Over there it says the first time. But the Rebbe says, well, maybe why Rashi doesn't say it over there in the parsha, because Rashi, the Rebbe quoted before when it says "Leucha loy lotzis v'lovei," which is a pasuk before he went with the Yeshua. So over there, Rashi already says that nitla rishus memeni, given to the other one. So when the pasuk says that he went with Yeshua, Rashi doesn't have to explain in Parshas Vayelech a few psukim later that why is Yeshua going, because it was given, because Rashi already said it. So maybe the reason why Rashi doesn't explain it when it says Moshe Yeshua, because Rashi already said in the beginning of Vayelech over there when it says Lo Yuchal Lotzis V'Loveh, but in Parshas Hazinu he says it again because it's an next parsha. It's not in the same parsha, so maybe Rashi wants to repeat it a second time. We can it for so, but we can't answer. As a yois vi Rashi hat schon gebracht dem Teuchen von dem Pirush in only Parshas Vayelech Kanal. Since Rashi already brought the idea of this Pirush in the beginning of Parshas Vayelech Kanal, Rashi said Lo uchal lotzis v'lovei means that he can no longer, not that he doesn't have koyach, but it was taking away permission from him. This is the beginning of Vayelech. So then later on, when it says that he went with Yeshua, Rashi doesn't have to say what Yeshua is doing there, because Rashi said already that it was taken away from Moshe and given to Yeshua. Darf Rashi nicht überchazen the minyan noch einmal in Hemshech HaParsha from Posik, so the Rashi doesn't need to repeat this again in the continuation, the pasuk on the verse Vayelech Moshe v'Yeshua. So there's no need for that. But maybe in our parsha, it's another parsha. So Rashi needs to tell us. But if Rashi doesn't have to say it because he already explained it, so why does Rashi need to repeat it again in our parsha when it says there that hu v'hoshea that nitlo reshus mizeh v'nitlo lozeh? He already said this in the beginning of Parsha V'elach. Unochmer, and furthermore, it's not just saying nitlo. Then Rashi continues. And Rashi says not just nitlo. Rashi says is a moisev the minion for Shabbos shel the zugyoiso. Says the Shabbos of two of a pair. So this is even more than just saying taken from him to the other pair. So why does Rashi have to say it here and add this point dafka in our Rashi? So if you're saying he doesn't have to repeat it in Vayelach because when it says the first time that Moshe Yeshua, because we already know from the beginning of Parshas Vayelach that Yeshua was a player because he says Leuchalovoi. Why does it actually have to repeat it and add B'Shabbos Shel Yezuga in the Parshas Hazinua? And the same thing is difficult with the other part. Weil derach says nicht verstandig wenn ich gehe Minyan von Hamed LaMoshe Beturgman. Same thing we don't understand really that Rashi brings down the second point that he placed Moshe gave him a translator. Rashi already brought in the portion of Pinchas. Rashi says over there, Somach Yodei, that he should lean his hand on Yeshua. And Rashi says that means Sheyidrash B'Hameten Loi Meturgma Sheyidrash B'Chayecho. Adarei b'shtat geis Moshe and ten Loi Meturgma Chulu. But Zichar it was Moshe B'Chaim given. Moshe was definitely fulfill it. So why does Rashi have to repeat it again in our parsha to bring down this idea that Moshe Rabbeinu placed him in the Meturgman? If Hashem told him to do that, for sure he did that. But the Rebbe explained that sometimes what Rashi says in another parsha, in another chumash, Rashi repeats again because maybe between the chumashim he wants to repeat it, but not to repeat in such details. Rashi could repeat it shortly. Afilim tim tzaloimer. Even if you're going to say that the reason Rashi says it as dos is al derech v'megifin bekama mekoymis b'pirush Rashi. This is similar to what we find in many places in Rashi. As an inyan basarot mefarish given in a friedrich sefer. That if it's an idea that he interpreted in a previous book, in this case, it's the book of Bamidbar. Then he repeats it again in the book that follows. So you'll say Rashi said it in Pinchas, but we still have to repeat it over here. It doesn't mean it's not considered repeating because it's a new parsha. You could repeat it. Rashi does that, and also in our case, it's not just regular repeating, but it's a different context. Over there, the Eibishter is telling him. Over here, we're saying that Moshe Rabbeinu did it. The Koshke beniten the Dan was letzich nit wegen demselben Inyan Bediuk. Certainly, in our case, we're not talking the very exact idea. In Parshas Pinchas, redt sich wegen dem Tzivah HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The portion of Pinchas, we talk about God's command. Ten le meturgamon, give him a translator. By us, we're talking about what he did. Hamid le Moshe meturgaman, Moshe Rabbeinu placed him. So therefore, it's okay for Rashi to repeat in a new Chumash the fact that he actually did what Hashem told him. But we don't need this whole details. That's difficult. Why Rashi has to bring down all the difficulties. So we need to move on. The Rebbe is pointing out with all this that there's something else in Rashi as the Rebbe wants to explain. Is aber nicht move on. Farvos darfer Ibrachazan alle protim. Why does they need to repeat all the details? Oich dem tam. He also gives the reasoning instead of just saying, "Kidei shelo yemru Yisro." Why is Rashi repeating that? He already gave the reason Parshas Pinchas why the Eibishter is telling him to place him a Turgamon. So they shouldn't say, Yeshua, you should not have raised yourself in the time of Moshe Rabbeinu's life, in his lifetime. So Moshe Rabbeinu was the one that gave him the Turgamon. Because so that reason is already explained. So Rashi said Bekitzer that he placed the Turgamon. About that He's already said there's a Parashat Pinchas. Even in cases where Rashi repeats something because it's in a different sefer, but he doesn't repeat all the details. Vorum ki medubar kam upon him. Because we spoke already many times, Pshas Rashi chazet iber apirish v'sarot shein gezogt frier. When Rashi repeats an interpretation that he already said earlier, Zokter does not be kitzer, he just gives it briefly. Und in the Erter, wo sagt es Iber mit alle Protmen, if there are places where Rashi goes ahead and gives all the details, is this der Far, wo das is Muchrich mit Zadik Suvim Malasar. It's because that is forced out. We need to explain this, the Psukim over here. So what is it that Rashi is trying to explain over here and gives us the reason that there is something which is specifically in our case. So again, so we will see all these things, how they are answered. Then the Rebbe wants to know some details in the Rashi. What is exactly the meaning of the Yuzugi? Ich darf man verstehen. The Loshen Shabbos shel Diyoy Zugi, Shabbos of two, of peers. Taich up Rashi in Gemara. Rashi translated in the Gemara. Shnei Zugis, it was two peers, meaning Shnei, two Chaverim, two friends. Hoyubo wore this. There were two friends in it. Tchilas Hayem LeMoshe, the beginning of the day was Moshe. V'soifoi lo Yeshua. The end of the day was Yeshua. So there were two friends. There were two peers. Rashi seems to say it wasn't that the two peers at the same time, but Rashi explains there were two peers within that same day. The beginning of the day was Moshe, and the end of the day was Yeshua. So they weren't a pair really together, but they both functioned in that same Shabbos. Was before Rashi. Simply, what is Rashi explaining in the Gemara? As the Yozuge can don it geteilt werden kipshuto im Loshen Zug. We cannot really translate it that this is really a pair. A pair means together, a zug. Warum the Nisius von Moshe is given betchilas hayoim von Yeshua besoife, because the leadership of Moshe was in the beginning of the day, and then when it finished, it went over to Yeshua. She's not given an inyan von Zug, beide zusammen, it wasn't a pair. They weren't both together at the same time. It means there were two friends, two together. There were two involved in this Shabbos. Isn't it? Move on. Since Rashi needs to explain what it means, Zugi, that it means not a peer, but they were friends in one Shabbos. Rashi explains it to a 15-year-old who's learning Gemara. Is pshita as a darfes toni limud al pipshatza ben chomish lemikra. For sure, Rashi should explain it. What does the Zugi mean when he's teaching a 5-year-old who's not going to understand what it means, because it's what the pair means over here. So why doesn't Rashi interpret this? So basically, the Rebbe is showing us uh, that there is other issues in here besides the fact the Rebbe asks, Rashi brings together all the different things in another Rashi. They're separate, but the Rebbe asks in the Gemara, it's in a different place. It's in the portion of Vayelech, who the Yeshua that they went to the Oyel Moed together by Yeshua V'Satzu Oyel Moed. And over there, the Gemara says that it was a Shabbos, Nitler Shabbos Shel Yuzugi, the Gemara says over there, and Nitler Shus Mezev and Nitler Lozeh. And Rashi doesn't teach it in Vayelech, but Rashi teaches it in Hazinu. And the Rebbe tries to say maybe he doesn't have to repeat it, but the Rebbe then eventually asks. Rashi already mentioned both in Yonim in Parshas Pinchas. He already talked about the Meturgaman, and in Parshas Vayelech Lo Yuchal Lo, he talks already about Nitler Shus Mezeh and Nitler Mezeh. And how come Rashi needs to Ba'arichas explain in this Rashi over here in Azinu uh, Ba'arichas, and also the reasoning why Laharim Roish Lochol Roish and Rashi doesn't teach us the There's a whole lot of details which is difficult to understand, but this is all going to lead us to the interpretation of the Rebbe. Dalit. So the Rebbe says first, let's look how Rashi's Loshen is different than the Sifri, and that will give us a clue to what Rashi is really coming to tell us. Vet man kol ze verstehen, Dalit, behagdim levayer dem shinu halashonis in Pirush Rashi, the change of language in Rashi, legabe dem Loshen in Sifri, relative to the language in the source in the Sifri. Aleph. And we're talking about this second aspect that we were dealing with now, Ten Lo Meturgaman. In Sifri state, Ten Lo Meturgaman LeYeshua, V'hu shoyel v'doirish u'moire b'hiroyes. Place the Meturgaman for Yeshua, and he's going to ask and expound, and they're going to teach laws, that Yeshua will be teaching laws. So this is discussing the fact that Moshe Rabbeinu gave Yeshua the translator so that Yeshua can be teaching. And when Abishai is saying to Moshe, Ukusheti Potter, when you pass away, Lo Yehu Yisrael Imrim Loi. So the Yidden shouldn't say to Yeshua, B'chaya Moshe Rabboch, during your teacher Moshe's lifetime, Lo Yiso Medaber. Then you weren't talking. Now you're talking. The Abishai says to Moshe, make sure that Yeshua talks during your lifetime. Because if Yeshua will not be talking and not be instructing during your lifetime, so the Yid will say to him, after you die, after you pass on, the Yid will say, you never spoke, you never taught during your teacher's Moshe's lifetime, so why are you teaching now? This is the way it says in Sifri. So it's all about teaching during Moshe's lifetimes. But in Rashi, it's not so much about teaching, it's just about being a leader. Mashenkin bepirush Rashi, Sheidorish b'chayev. Why does he want him to expound during his lifetime? Because b'chayev raboch lo yehoyu loch lohorim rosh. Over there it says during your lifetime of your teacher, you should not have raised your head. Moshe Rabbeinu is giving him a maturgamon because he is teaching Torah now. Over there, the point was he should teach Torah. But here, according to Rashi, you're teaching Torah, and the criticism is going to be, why are you teaching Torah while your teacher, your Moshe Rabbeinu is still around? And what is their diuk haloshen lahorim reish? What's the precise language? You shouldn't have raised your head. That's one thing. Beis benegeya dem tam was verde angerufen Hosea. And let's compare this. The reason why is it called Hosea? Steht in Sifri. In Sifri it says lelamdoch tzidkos shel Yeshua. This is to teach you the merit, the righteousness of Yeshua. Because Shemei I would think Shetzofa Daite Olav, that his mind floated, he became arrogant, Mishenitno Birshus, that once it was given, that Eibsha took the permission, gave him permission now to Yeshua. Talmud Loimar Hu V'Hosea bin Nun. That's what he said, Hosea b'tzid kosei, that Hosea, this Lashon Sifri, Hosea stated his righteousness, even though he was appointed as a parnas, a leader over the community, he's still in his righteousness. That's the Sifri. Rashi's October in ganz anders. Rashi says entirely different. Shleizocho taito olof, that his mind was not hori upon him. Sha'afal pisha nitnele gedula, even though he was given greatness. Hishpil atzme kashem mitchilose. He lowered himself, not that he remained in his righteousness, remained in his previous status, but actually is given the gedula. He made himself low like in the beginning. What does this all mean? All these changes as well. So the Rebbe points to the different changes, and the Rebbe's explanation will explain and see really what Rashi is trying to say over here. First, the Rebbe is going to say that the fact that Moshe Rabbeinu says Leuchal Oid Lotzis V'Lovei, that the Rishus was taken away from him. Not that he doesn't have the koyach, but the Rishus was taken away from him and given to Yeshua, doesn't mean that that happened then. Moshe Rabbeinu was saying that I can no longer lead the Yidden because I don't have the right, and that may happen at a further point, not at that point. Because the reasoning is that he's not going to take, the Eibusha said to Moshe, you're not going to go into past the Yarden. And Leuchalotz is love, it could mean eventually I won't be able to lead. It will be Moshe Rabbeinu, it will be Yeshua. But it doesn't mean that it happened then. Let's look inside. So therefore, until now that it says Beferish, that this Shira was said after the Parshas Hazinua, Huva Isheya, that's where the first time we see that the Torah is trying to tell us over here that Yeshua became actually the leader there. Hey, Yeshlema de Bir B'choze. Der Tambus Rashi sagt nicht dem Inyan von Shabbos shel Diyoz Gehoiso. Gleich in only Parshas Vayelech. Why doesn't he say it in the beginning of the portion of Vayelech? Is weil dorten is nicht talking hechrich zu sagen, because over there we don't have to say as demut hat sich schon angeheben bepoil nisiusa shel Yeshua, that at that point the leadership of Yeshua actually started. Warum afal pi as Rashi sagt, even though Rashi says Eini Rashoi shenitlo mimeni rishus v'nitlo Yeshua, that I'm not allowed to because permission has been taken from me and given to Yeshua. Is the Rashi gleich mamshir behemshir pirushai? Rashi continues in the continuation of his pirush. Vashem Omar Elai, that Hashem said to me that Lo Saber Es Hayardin Hazeh. Vashem Omar Elai, Zehu pirush. That's the meaning. Why Lo Uchal Lotzeis V'Lovoi? Why don't I have a right? Because Hashem's Leuchal Lotzus V'Lovei, Lefish Hashem Omer Alai Loisabres Yad Nazeh. Hashem says you're not gonna me with the Yardin. That's why the Eibishter took away and says Leuchal Lovei. But that means this haste as the Shinas Rishus to Yeshua is Negeya. This that the Rishus was given from him to Yeshua is not important. Nit by Bayom, not at that point, nor. Because of the idea, and therefore the Zman from Tavres Yard Nazeh. So before they pass the Yarden, Yeshua has to be because Leuchal Lots love it. Ubemela is the token hechrech. So therefore we're not forced to say as be'es Amiras Moshe Leuchal Lots v'lovei, that when Moshe Rabbeinu said I'm not able to go out and come in, that the leadership of Yeshua already started then. So simply, when you read the Rashi right away, it seems nitlo that happened then. But when you look the continuation, the Rashi says, Vashem Omar Elai is an explanation. So that means up till the time was Havaras Hayardin, it doesn't mean that point it was already happened then. But Loi Uchal, I won't be able to, because it's taken from me, given to him for that period of time. Doesn't mean that it happened now. Al derech ze in posuk vayelech Moshe v'Yeshua v'Yisyatzu b'Oel Moed. Over there, the Gemara says over there, but in the posuk, weiter in Parshas Vayelech, is in them as Yeshua is rein zusammen mit Moshe and Oel Moed. So the fact that Yeshua went together with Moshe and Oel Moed, the talking teuchen, there's no idea, there's no context there, as Yeshua is shein gewen an Nosel Yisrael bepoil, that he was already actually a leader on the Yidden. Das is nor gewen a kiyum ha'amira for the Meibishten. What they wanted, this was fulfilling a statement, a saying that Hashem said, Krov Yeshua, call Yeshua, Bisyatzu B'Oel Moed, and stand in the Moed, V'atzavenu, and I will instruct him, but that doesn't mean that he's become the Nasi B'Poel. B'shas, aber mekum zu Parsha Seinu, but when we come to our Parsha in Hazinua, for the Pasuk Zok, Vayidaber Goimer Hu V'Yeshu B'Nun, who was speaking to the Bnei Yisrael? This was Moshe and Yeshua ben Nun. Verdo dit mir, the question becomes, was is Kavonas HaKosuf im Mitzarev Zayin Yeshua mit Moshe? What does the pasuk mean? Him and Yeshua, Torah says both of them. Wie kommt da rein Yeshua? Hosea, how does Yeshua come here? Enoch Inami, Yeshua was always with Moshe Rabbeinu, but Yeshua never was teaching. Why is Yeshua over here speaking to the Yidden who V'Yeshu ben Nun? Yeshua never left the tent, he was always with Moshe. And he's standing with Moshe, he was always with Moshe. Aber my time was the Torah Zoktas beferish Nafkedo. Why does the Torah tell us over here that he and Moshe, he was there, but Why say it over here? Muss man sagen, as the Wörter Huve Shebe Nun, it's not just that he was there, but he spoke. Huve Shebe Nun beziehen sich zu dem Vaidaber Shebetchilas HaKosov. Vaidaber Huve Shebe Nun. It's not who and the Shebe Nun was there, but Huve Shebe Nun both spoke. Shebetchilas HaKosov das heißt. Nachdem wird der Teure erzählt, als Moshe hat gesagt, die Shira. The Torah relates that Moshe Rabbeinu said the Shira to the Yidden. By Daber Divra Shira Zois Atuma Moshe Rabbeinu. Is the Pasuk Mosif, who Vashebinu? There it says no. Who said the Shira hat gesagt, nicht bloß Moshe allein. It wasn't just said by Moshe. Nor euch Yeshua ben Nun hat das gesagt. He too said it. Ba'oznei in the ears of the people. So the Torah sort of comes to qualify after saying that he spoke to the Yidden. It says again, who Shibinu, that Shibinu also gave it in those nail. And furthermore, the Rebbe says, the who is extra because it already says Vadaber Moshe. Noch mehr, von dem was the Torah sagt, who Shibinu. Here, the is the word who Iberik. Is moving. As the Torah is the mit madgish, as Moshe and Yeshua seien dort gewähnt, beide gleich. The Torah emphasizes here that Moshe and Yeshua were equal. Hu v'shebenun, in them inyan, v'oifen dibur in this idea and the way they spoke. Besignon von anos libnei Yisrael. They spoke just like a leader speaks to the Bnei Yisrael. Und der Riber sagt Rashi davke do as Shabbos shel Jesu gehoiso. He says it was a Shabbos of a period. Rashi doesn't say it. Lots is love that nitlo mizeh and was the Rashi doesn't say that. Und da Rashi darf nicht austäuschen, was das meint, Kavanos bezel, like the Rebbe asked in the Gemara, is kipshutik mashmo. As sie seinen gewähnt beide zusammen azug von Nisim. They were a peer of leaders. They were both leaders at that time. It was a Shabbos shel Diyezugim. Shabbos shel Diyezugim means that they were both peers. They were two leaders, a peer of leaders together. And not like Rashi explained in the Gemara, they were Chaverim, they shared that same Shabbos, one in the morning and one in the afternoon. No, they were a peer together. Who? V'Oshea Binun, they did it together. So what does it mean? Nitlo Rishus Mizeh and Nitlo Lozeh? Meaning not that it was taken away from Moshe Rabbeinu totally. It was taken away that Moshe was no longer the only leader. Nitlo Mizeh, taken from Moshe, means up till that point Moshe was the only leader. It was taken from him, and not Nitlo Lozeh was given away because they were both leaders. That's why Rashi has to say Shabbos Shel Diyazuki to tell us they were both leaders, not only the morning and the afternoon. They were same day. They were both leaders. Macht Rashi chlor as those was said is mamshich la'acharize that he continues afterwards. It says nitlo rishus mizeh v'nitlo zeh. Permission was taken from this one, given to the other one. Meint nit as dan hat sich schon geendigt nesios shel Moshe. It does not mean that the leadership of Moshe has completed that. Nor es ist gewesen an Eufung von Zug. It finished that he wasn't alone, but now they became a pair, beide zusammen. Nor wie bald as Moshe schon nicht gewesen der einzige Nos, since he was no longer the only leader, in an Eufung von Dabar Echad Ladoyer, like you have one ruler for the generation, sagt man of them, nitlo reshus mezeh v'nitlo zeh, meaning taken from him and giving to the other one, that the other one also joins him, but it doesn't really mean that he has the rights that have been taken away from him and given over to somebody else. And now this explains the why Rashi continues that Hemed loy meturgama. Damit Vov wird euch verstandig werden bepashtus, bis verantwortet bepashtus, for was Rashi is the moisiv Hemed loy Moshe meturgaman le Yeshua, that he placed them in meturgama. Und is sich nicht mistapik mit nit lo reshus mizeh v'not lo lozer. He's not satisfied with just saying it was taken from Moshe given to Yeshua, like he says there in Parshas Vayelech, but says that Moshe gave him the Meturgaman. Weil in dem besteht der Chiddush von dem Posuk Hu v'Yeshua Binun. Because this is the novelty. This is what the Posuk is telling us here. A Nossi has a Meturgaman. Just like he had a Meturgaman, now Yeshua has a Meturgaman. Hu v'Yeshua Binun. As Yeshua had bepoil geret mit Eden in derselben Eufen wie Moshe, that Yeshua spoke to Eden the same way as Moshe. Nisi is bepoil. It was actual leadership. Yeshua gedarshan ba'oznei ha'om ve'anosi darshan. Yeshua expounded to the people as a Nasi expounds mit ha-meturgaman, with a meturgaman. So that is what the pasuk is saying here, Hu v'Yeshua bin Nun, that they're both together Nasi. Al pizeh is euch verstandig der Chiddush von dem Pirush Rashi. Or why does Rashi have to say this? Lagabi Pirush Parsh Pinchas. It's a whole new thing that Rashi is saying over here, not what he said in Parshas Pinchas. Verzok ten loy meturgman sheyidresh bechayecha. Give him a turgman should darshan in chayecha. Darshan during your lifetime. Over there, giving him a turgman is not a sign of leadership. Over there, the meturgman, that the Yidden shouldn't say that he shouldn't have, shouldn't complain. Here, the meturgman is an esiyas. Meturgman for droshes Yeshuv from Parshas Pinchas. The meturgman for the droshes in Parshas Pinchas is not given an inyan from the esiyas. That wasn't a matter of leadership, nor kidei la fuki. It's just to exclude as Eden zolonit zogen. That was only for people that you should have not raised your head during Moshe when Moshe was there. So Moshe had to do something so that people shouldn't complain against Yeshua. Why is he saying? So he put him on Meturgama. When the father is given there on Zog Tendla Meturgama Shidush B'chayecha. That's why Hashem told him, give him a Turgaman, that he will expound during your lifetime, so people will see that Moshe Rabbeinu told him to speak in his lifetime, so it wasn't that he did on his own. So that was the command that the Eibishter told him, and that's why they gave him a Turgaman. But in our parsha, the Meturgaman is an expression of Nesias, Masha'enkein, Parsha Yisenu, Zoktas Rashi, Behemshech Lepirush Lifnesa. Rashi says it as a continuation to the interpretation before it. Shabbos shel de zugi, hoisanit l'reshus mizeh, benit l'zeh. It was a Shabbos of a peer that was taken from Moshe and given to their Bahainu. Adosis by Yeshua given b'ter Nesias. This was by Yeshua as a leader. Bizin an oifen fun de zugi, together. Yeshua is a ben zug from Moshe Rabbeinu, together with Moshe Rabbeinu. So it's a whole nother level of the Meturgamon. Rashi is explaining here, Meturgamon, this is the Dioizugi, this is the pair, and this is the equality that Moshe has with Yeshua, that they both have Meturgamos. And the reason why we have the Hemshech Rashi that Rebbe explains now is because the question that needs an answer is now, why Takya? Why did the Eibishter make it in such a way that Yeshua should become a leader within the leadership of Moshe Rabbeinu, that it should be both at the same time? Zai, aber Rashi kennt sich nicht mistapik sein mit Zog Shabbos shel Yezugi chulu, Hemed LaMoshe Beturgam chulu. These two aspects, that it was a Shabbos of a peer, and Moshe Rabbeinu put a translator so that their Yeshua and Moshe are equal. Because there is a great question, a big surprise here. Why was it necessary, such an order? As Nisiuse shall Yeshua soll sich anheben noch b'chaye Moshe, that the leadership of Yeshua should start while Moshe is alive. Heipech haklal davarech dadir, which goes against the rule that there's one ruler in a generation. Why did Yeshua start during the lifetime of Moshe Rabbeinu? Ein och in Nami Moshe hat gedarft memade sein Yeshua al sein memale. Yes, it's true that Moshe needed to appoint Yeshua to be his replacement. But what was it necessary? What forces the situation as Yeshua Talmidish Moshe Zolfir Nesias Bechaye Rabbi Moshe? Why should he be leading and be a leader during his lifetime of his teacher Moshe? In an Eifum von Yeshua gebetet zusammen in such a way that they're both together. Und nicht wie wir gefunden bei anderen Malemokim, not as we find by other people that replaced the previous from the Nisim Shalifneim that replaced the leaders for before them. As the Nesias from the Malemokim, that the leadership of the one who replaced Afilu when it is the Zubashtim geworden in Farois. Even if he was already designated before, we knew that he's going to replace. It didn't only come after the passing. It always started after the leader beforehand passed away. Why are we giving the leadership to Yeshua while Moshe is alive? Of them is Rashi Mamshich. That's not the Yeshua that said. Rashi Mamshich, Shaloyim Yoimru Yisrael B'chaya Raboch Lahoyeloch Lahorim Rosh. So they shouldn't say that during the lifetime of your Rebbe, the Moshe, you should not have raised your head. Dafke by Yeshua, it was necessary by Yeshua, especially to raise him. Mitzadem was b'chayi Moshe is a ganze Hanhoge gewesen Akivon Hofchim. The way Yeshua conduct was totally in a different direction. Verkehrt betachlis von Reinumis. He was in totally opposite of exaltness. He was bittel v'shiflus. He was humble and lowered. Kol Mahuse is bashtanen. His entire essence consisted in them was it is Meshoris Moshe. He's a servant of Moshe. As the pasuk says, Meshoris Yeshua Gomer Nar. He was a lad, lo yomish Gomer. He would never remove. Is kiseder gestanden in Hazinua und tachlis habitl. He was always in a movement of total negation, self-negation. Nar, he was like a lad, umshoris, a servant. Unlike we find, for example, by Adam. The Alpha Pivas Moshe is given the Nasi, even though Moshe was the leader. Also, Aaron himself was teaching Torah for all Yidden. Rashi brings in them said their Mishnah. Rashi brings the order of learning Moshe Rabbeinu Torah than Aaron taught. Aber bei Yeshua gefindt man nicht bis damals keine Inyan Shalom Sakol Yisrael. We don't find up to this point any aspect, any area of exaltness over the Yidden, over the Yidden. Und der Vater hat man da beim Yuchat Gedarba warnen. And that's why over here it was necessary to caution us, Yidden sollen nicht sagen, that Yidden shouldn't say, B'chaya Raboch lohoyin loch lohorim rosh. During the lifetime of your teacher, you should not have raised your head. Has Yosas by im had gefelt legamri. Since he was lacking, he never raised his head. It was other. Is der far nit mesugel zu sein a Nasi Yisrael. He's not fitting to be a Nasi Yisrael. Und der Riber, Hamed la Moshe meturgum an Yeshua shedarsh b'chayev. He made him the leader during his lifetime because otherwise people would not take leadership from him because he was always presumed to be totally bittul, a nar and a meshoris. Uh, and they would say you should not be a leader. Moshe Rabbeinu puts in the Turkey and says, yes, Aram Yisrael. That's why it was made, especially because of the situation with Yeshua's self negation that we needed to be during the leadership of Moshe Rabbeinu. Yes, because wird man nicht verstehen den Hemmschich in Pirush Rashi. Also understand the continuation of Rashi. V'lama koire kano Yeshaya. So why does he call him Yeshaya? Loimar shalei zocha daito Allah. To tell us that his mind did not become haughty over him. Und Rashi is medayik zu sagen, hishpil atzmei kasher bitchilosei. That he lowered himself like in the beginning. Nitvi sifri huve sheya b'tzit koichulo. It was righteousness. Why? The shaila is nitztam loma koide ho'esheya. It's not just, why is it just we choose to call it Sheya? Lachrivim miten anome gigem Yeshua. Since his name is really Yeshua, so why call him Yeshua? That's not the question. Nor velomo koide kan Yeshua. Why in this posse call him Yeshua? Here we're trying to emphasize that Yeshua is a leader, and Moshe is making him a leader. And they shouldn't say Lahorim Rosh because of his bittul that he exposed. So we should not call him Moshe, we should call him Yeshua. The Shaiva Nitztam Loma Kore Yeshua La'achri V'motim Anomik again Yeshua after he's called Yeshua. Nor V'loma Kore Kanashe in them posik. V'chere Adrab. It was even the contrary. Davke in them posik is Masim Zulm Rufin Yeshua. About der Posse kommt Matgi sein dem Inyan behechrich von Aromas Reish. Nisius shall Yeshua Shem B'chayim Moshe. The Torah is coming to emphasize the idea and that we had to raise him in the time of the life of Moshe Rabbeinu. Shem B'chayim Moshe during Moshe's lifetime. Wie kommt es, als der Posse kleibt der Ois Davkim dem Nomen Hosea? Why would the Posse choose here the name Hosea? That was before he gave Yeshua. And this reminds us that he needed help to Moshe Rabbeinu to protect him. That's what he gave. It was der Mond, as Yeshua had gedacht onkommen zu der Tefillah, that Yeshua needed this prayer, Michedes, von Moshe, as be'osin, Yudke Yeshich Matzas Meraglim. He called him Yeshua so that in the future, Hashem should protect him from a device of Meraglim, and it means he might fail. So why are we calling him Yeshua here? Of them is Rashi Mevayer. The Rashi explains as Adrabe, on the contrary. Loimer, this is coming to tell us. Das kommt lernen malosi shel Yeshua. This is coming to teach us the greatness, the advantage of Yeshua. Shloi zocha daita olav, that his mind did not become harish. Afal pisha nitna loy gedula, even though greatness had been given to him. Hishpil atzme kasher mitchilosei, he lowered himself like in the beginning. Teva ha'odom, human nature is as b'shas and his gedula. When you go up to greatness, and there is seine midas van hogis, then his character traits and his conduct, behesim to them shinui, v'gedula shaloi, it fits up that change, and your greatness, your character changes to that level. Bachas kama v'kama b'yinesis, certainly when you become a leader. As this man anosi, when one is appointed as a leader, ruftes by imarois atnu for gedula v'yisnasus. This brings out by the person a movement of greatness and rising. Nit chas v'sholom atnu from guy. We're not talking about, God forbid, a movement of arrogance, v'yeshus, and self-recognition, chas v'sholom. But not in Kedusha Gufa, but within Kedusha Atnua, it's a movement from Gedula v'reimemus, of greatness and exaltness, was for the Tzachal Torah, which is required from the Torah. Kedei the Nosis all cannot feed in his Yosi Kedeboyi. So that the leader should be able to fear, to lead his leadership as properly. When Rashi brings Benidin the Dan, and Rashi brings in our case as the Rebbe Zokt on Yeshua, he says Yeshua, Tul Makil Vahach, take a stick and bang over them so they should listen to you. Und das der Zell the Torah. And this the Torah relates. As need gucken dich dem, was mit ihm gegeben Yeshua und Gedula, notwithstanding that he was given greatness. Und sicher bekommen bis Michas Moshe Bein Yofa, and certainly he received, when Moshe leaned himself with a good eye, the Neitike Gedula v'Isnasus v'Sanosi darf haben, the necessary greatness and exaltness that a leader needs to have. Is over beyachadim zeh b'im gewendet nur, but together with that what he received from Moshe, that greatness that is nasus, gewendet nur van hoga von hishpil atzme kasher mit chilosei, he lowered himself as in the beginning. Pung vi eider mahotim gegeben gedula. Just like before he was given the greatness, his given Moshe, his idea was he was a servant of Moshe, and hoga von shiflus, a conduct of humility. Same thing later on. When greatness was given to him, he's by him geblieben, the Zelba and Hogev et Nua from Shiflus Atzmei. It remained the same conduct, the same movement of self-humility, humble. Hishpil Atzmei Kashem Betchilose, he lowered himself as in the beginning. He didn't change at all. Shezeu Shayich Gam Lazeh. Say this is also connected to Rashi Otarab gebracht früher. Rashi brought earlier Pnei Moshe Kechamo Pnei Yeshua Kelevona, that Moshe was like the sun, Yeshua was like the moon. As by Imot sich ständig anger, by Yeshua, he always sensed as a makabel, that he's a recipient. The Levona from the Shemesh as the moon from the sun. And therefore he was small and humble fitting this. So the Rebbe brings out that the reason why Rashi has to bring this down, because one wonders why we're calling him Hosea here when we're trying to say that this is Hosea's, he was a leader, he was a Meturgamon, and he was fit for this Gedula. So why are we calling him Hosea, which reminds us of that he needed to come onto Moshe Rabbeinu's blessing to protect him from the Varaglim? And the answer is that this is Taka trying to tell us his Maila. Yeshua was unique in the sense, while he was humble and he was a recipient, he was always remained that recipient, always remained that humility. Just like before, he didn't change. And that's why the Torah calls him Yeshua, to point out that notwithstanding all of his greatness, still, he remained as before. Test from them. This also gives us a lesson in the service of each one. This is given by Yeshua, just as it was by Yeshua. That after he merited greatness, so not just greatness, to such a great level of greatness as it had gotten Moshe, he became a leader even in Moshe Rabbeinu's life. In a way of a peer. Is von deswegen bei sich Schoffel betachlis kashem mit chilose. He remained humble like in the beginning. Al derech zeh by yed gidden. Same thing is by every Yid. Frat as Moshe Mesora Yeshua, that Moshe gave it to Yeshua. Pshasar is zechet zayinin shal gadlus, when he merits a matter of greatness. Gadlus in an inyan shal srov, or greatness in a matter of dominance, or gadlus b'sharinyan, or greatness in other matters. You merit elevated blessing from Hashem. He may make a calculation as the fun gufa was had given to the godless. In fact, itself, that he merited this greatness, is a simon. That's a proof as davke Israelus, and that he is the one that is fitting to this. Ubemela, ruftes arois ba'im atnua von archovas hadas. This brings out a widening of his mind. We're not talking about arrogance, God forbid, but at least a movement of wideness and exaltness. Let it not from Yeshua, we learn from Yeshua's Adrab. The contrary, that specifically when you merit an area of greatness, you need to lower yourself like in the beginning. When those is the keli, that becomes the vessel, as the gadlus was megitim zal haben hakim, that this greatness should have sustained, that it should be sustained. So the lesson is from Yeshua that when you get greatness or you get blessings, don't let it make you feel haughty or big, not even haughty, not even arrogance, but not even this wideness, but to stay humble as you were before. And that is the secret to keeping those blessings. Yud. It also connected the time of the year when we read it in the Torah, either after or after, but close to Rosh Hashanah. It's seen as read after, but close to Rosh Hashanah. The avodah for Rosh Hashanah is Imru Chulush Tamluchun Aleichem. What is Rosh Hashanah's service? Say Malchies, make Hashem a king over you. Eden seine Mamlich dem Ebersten, Eden make the God a king als Melech. Melech Yisrael und Melech al Kol Olam Kulei, king of Eden and the king over the whole world. Bald as the Inyan from Melucha werd aufgetan durch Avodas Yisrael. Since the kingdom is accomplished through the Yidden's service, we say Tamluchuni Aleichem. So we are accomplishing that. That means Weistes doch of der Chashivas von Yidden. So that points to the importance that a Yid can do this. As bekoichem is to mamlich sein the Melech Malcham Lochem HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That they have the power to make Hashem the king of Kadosh Baruch Hu. B'meilek and therefore not is coming as far, so you could have an idea as on this mit Hazinua von Hepech HaShiflus Lagamri, that he should be aroused and awakened to a movement which is opposite of being total humble. Is it them the hero? That's why we have the lesson as Adrab. The contrary, specifically after the Yidden accomplished such an important, great matter from Mamlech sein dem Ebersten als Melech to King Hashem as a king, this must bring out by Yidden a movement from Bittul Betachlis, total humility, Hishpil Atzme, to lower yourself. Durch them, don't let the power that you have to bring a king make you opposite of total humility, but contrary, this should bring you Hishpil Atzme. Durch them, and through this is Moisif Nochmer. You add even more in Birchas Hashem B'chol HaMetzdarech, in the blessing of Hashem and all that we need in Achasimon Agamach Simatova to be sealed, and the complete sealing for the good. The Shama Tova Mesukra, for a good and sweet year. B'Tova Nira V'Anigla, and good that is visible and revealed. The Mata Masara Tvachim, Lota and Tvachim Bebone Chayim Zen Revicha, in children, life, and sustenance in a wide way. And all the above should be in a wide way. This is Sichos Shabbos Parshas Hazinua, Tovshin Lamed Aleph and Tovshin Mem Gimel.